Soon we will conquer the worlds by crystals. Yes, we will.
This scaly bitch is totally out of her mind.
Following the release of their first RPG, Divine Divinity, Larian was in trouble. Their publisher at the time, CDV Software, had really screwed them over with an unfavorable contract that saw them earn very little from Divine Divinity, despite the pretty good sales numbers. This saw them reduced from a team of 30 to a team of 3. Things were dire, and the story could have ended there, but Larian and its CEO, Sven Vinke, are nothing if not persistent, so they went to work rebuilding. And while gathering funding, making kids games and educational software, they brought some of the team that worked on Divine Divinity back together and got to work on their next game, Beyond Divinity. A lot of stuff would be reused from the first game, like the engine and a lot of visual assets, but they would also partially move to 3D graphics with the character models, while retaining the old 2D environments. They would also make a ton of gameplay changes, so let's see what the results were. Much like the first game, this one starts with a cutscene, though the first game's elaborate 3D animated intro is gone in favor of this ye-old PowerPoint slideshow, narrated by a voice actor hamming it up like a grocery store in December.
And the pompous fools didn't expect much trouble. They were wrong. The smiles were soon wiped off their smug faces when the necromancer summoned the demon overlord Samuel to his aid. A daring summoning indeed, as Samuel can be notoriously difficult to deal with. But unfortunately for me, in this particular case, the demon proved to be most useful.
He explains the immediate backstory. We were a paladin serving in the army of the Divine One, sworn to hunt down evildoers everywhere until a necromancer turned the tables on us by summoning the archdemon Samuel, who made short work of our party and brought us back to his base on the demon-infested world of Nemesis to be tortured for his amusement. After a failed escape attempt, he decided to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, punishing both us and our Death Knight jailer by forging our souls together. If we get too far apart, we die. If one of us dies, the other dies too. So, until the bond is broken, we're stuck with each other. One a champion of good, the other of evil. Arch enemies forced to join forces or perish. And that's how the game starts, with the Death Knight breaking us out of our cell and explaining that if we want to be free of each other, we need the help of the witch he once served back on Rivellon, the more ordinary fantasy world the first game took place on. So that's our objective. Find a way to return to Rivellon and find the witch so she can break the bond between our souls. Well, the game actually starts with character creation, which is very different from the first game. No longer are we picking a pre-made character from a lineup. Instead, we have a more complete character creation where we can pick our body type, hairstyle, and gender. Those genders being man, woman, and child, along with every body type you can imagine. Dad bod, jacked, slenderman, and American. Though with our backstory as a soldier in the Divine One's army, the option to play as a child has some implications about the Divine One. Gameplay-wise, the character creation has also moved more towards a classless society, with our starting stat points and set of starter skills being the only things we can pick at this point. But when that's done, you also get to make the same choices for the Death Knight. His looks can't be customized, but his stats and starting skills can, just like the Paladins. I made both the guys warriors since that felt the most appropriate when looking at the cover art, though my plan changed when I saw that you get archery as one of your starting skills as a warrior. Remembering how strong archery was in the first game, I gave the Paladin a ranged build, while the Death Knight would stay a melee fighter, swinging around two-handed swords and axes like an edgy barbarian. And as we fight the guards and various other creatures inhabiting the Citadel, we get our first taste of how this two-character system affects the combat. Beyond maintains a lot of the first game's Diablo clone ARPG combat style, but with that party of 2 characters to keep track of. And it's not bad. With only 1 character selected, the game controls more or less the same as the first one, with left clicking used to move, attack enemies, and interact with objects, while the right click uses abilities. But you can also select the whole party and give commands to all of them, with the character selected when you do so becoming a kind of party leader, who will lead the way and interact with objects when you click them. It's kind of impressive just how little the controls needed to change from the first game to accommodate the added character, and I got used to it a lot faster than I expected. Both of the guys share an XP bar, meaning they level at the same time, but you can allocate their stat and skill points separately. One difference between them is that the Death Knight can't wear armor since he has a set built in. which makes him pretty tanky, especially in the early game when all the armor you can find is pretty crap. And his built-in armor also passively improves as he levels, so he stays a pretty good tank for the party throughout the game. And I know I've said the word party a lot when talking about a game where you only control 2 characters, and that's because you can kind of have more characters in the party. You'll occasionally find these dolls throughout the game that summon a little guy you can control to battle alongside you. These vary in usefulness, and there are skills you can invest in on your main guys to improve their stats or teach them more skills, but I never used them much for combat. If you move them too far away from where they were summoned, they'll just get Thanos snapped out of existence, and you'll need to wait a little while before you can summon them again. This crippling handicap can be mitigated with skills on the main guys, but I never really bothered since it's just more micromanagement that didn't really feel strong enough to justify itself. Most of the use these guys got in combat was shooting difficult enemies with a crossbow as the Death Knight guided them around. I mostly just use these guys as pack mules to carry around stuff to sell, since they keep what's in their inventories even when they aren't summoned. Another reason I didn't use them much is the same reason I didn't experiment a lot with abilities in general, and that's the new skill system. Gone is the simple, almost perk system from the first game, replaced with a more complex system where you invest skill points into improving certain aspects of a skill rather than an overall improvement. Let's compare the sword skill in both games as an example. In the first game, you have one skill for swords that improves accuracy, damage, and attack speed. 5 points in that bad boy will make you the best swordsman you can be. In Beyond, you can instead invest points in the slashing skill, which improves all weapons that do slashing damage, which includes swords. There you can invest points into accuracy, damage, durability, crit chance, and death blow, which is kinda like a super crit. Each of these are leveled separately, and you can invest up to 12 skill points into each of these. If you count the post-game, that number goes up to 20. And there are now also separate skills for two-handed weapons, one-handed weapons used with a shield. Why you would use a one-handed weapon without a shield, I don't know, but apparently the guys at Larian did, and thought it was important enough to warrant its own skill. And all these categories for the newly introduced alternate damage types of Bone and Shadow. But you only get 1 skill point per level, along with a bonus point every 5 levels, which is the same amount you got in the first game, where you only needed a fraction of the points you do in this one. The first game also had gear that unlocked skills, giving you even more points to work with, which are nowhere to be found here. As you might imagine, this leads to a game-long shortage of skill points. I never had enough points to max out just the essentials of a single weapon skill, and I certainly never had any left over to experiment with. This might partially be my fault though, because of a feature we'll talk about a bit later. I should clarify though, the issue here is that the system discourages experimentation, needlessly limits build variety, and feels pretty unsatisfying. Not that any of this makes the game hard, because it really isn't. Compared to the first game, it's a real step down in terms of difficulty. In that game, I was constantly running into difficult enemies that I couldn't take on just by attacking them head on, which forced me to try out new tactics and use new abilities, which I was able to do thanks to the plentiful skill points. Here on the other hand, I was able to pretty easily carve my way through nearly every encounter just by right-clicking the enemy and spamming health potions, both on the medium action difficulty and the harder tactical difficulty, with the only real exceptions appearing in the very early and very late game, but we'll get to that later. Another thing that's changed about the skill system is that you now need training from either an NPC or a book before you can learn a skill, other than the starting skills you pick at character creation. It's not a massive difference. For the most part, it just keeps you from learning powerful spells in the early game, since their trainers are only found in later acts. One sort of baffling example is the Soul Trainer that can teach you most of the basic warrior abilities, like improving the whirlwind attack. He's only found near the end of the final act, almost at the very end of the game. There are genuinely only like 2 or 3 battles left after encountering this guy. And it's not like he's some wise master teaching you the secret techniques of the ancients. He's just some guy that figured out that spinning's a good trick when no one else could. Also, when you're buying training for a skill, it only shows you the name of the skill, not what the skill actually does. And it's not always obvious what exactly you're paying to learn. Like, what the hell does ethereal magic age objects do? It reduces an enemy's armor. Wouldn't have been my first guess. Let's change things up by talking about something the game did well. The first act is actually pretty good. You're not eased into the world with a peaceful village to explore. Instead, you're immediately thrown into a fight for your life escaping from Demon Alcatraz, and the atmosphere is great. The walls are sprinkled with weird tooth-like spikes, dismembered remains decorate the floors, and the whole place has a good naturalistic design, with most rooms having a clear purpose to them, like how you have a clearly identifiable kitchen, a storage room, and a torture chamber. It's a bit linear, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, and the level design keeps things interesting. First when you leave the prison into the skeleton-filled lower levels, abandoned and forgotten by the Citadel's overlord. And then when you leave those to the mustering grounds, where you have to don a disguise to infiltrate Samuel's army and avoid patrolling Death Knights that can see through the disguise in a stealth section, which admittedly is pretty shit. But where being discovered is, mercifully, not an instant fail. So I took a more no-witnesses approach to stealth, and the game didn't stop me. There are also plenty of optional side quests, areas to explore, and NPCs to talk to. But when interacting with these NPCs, it becomes increasingly apparent that many of the immersion features from the first game have been removed. Like how you can talk to anyone with your weapons drawn without them reacting to that, or how you can rob them of all their possessions without so much as a word of protest. It's not the end of the world, but it makes the world feel a bit less lived in and real. Characters you talk to also mostly have voice dialogue now. Voice dialogue of, let's say, mixed quality. Some of it's alright.
They are primitive compared to the followers of the Lord of Chaos. We had no problem conquering their universe. Thousands are now working as slaves for our Lord.
Much of it is downright terrible.
I'll have her blood crawl out of her skin for this. Never mind that. Maybe you could convince her to undo this curse and help me out. I will be most generous with you afterwards.
It suffers heavily from Oblivionitis, where there are a lot of voiced characters, but not a lot of voice actors. And the voice actors don't have enough range to properly differentiate between the many characters each of them are made to portray.
New faces are always welcome here. At least human ones. Our great lord has called upon you to bring back his holy relics, hasn't he, my child? Come to the army of chaos, they told us. Glory awaits you here, they said. The only thing I've got so far are blisters.
I think someone realized this because for a lot of the non-human characters, they seemingly tried to make up for it by means of aggressive voice modulation. This varies from voices sounding slightly altered.
What do you want again? More torture? I told you, I not know where gold is buried.
To borderline incomprehensible.
Greetings! Do not fear. A spider of my age isn't looking for human flesh anymore, nor for a hard fight.
Our world is so complex and versatile. I'm searching for the answer, the ultimate answer, the answer to all questions.
I really prefer the limited voiceover in the first game to this. The voiceover was hammy, sure, but the work was consistently higher quality than it is here.
You'll never take me alive, copper!
And the player character had a voice. Hell, there were several you could choose from, while this game has none. Which means that, tragically, we can no longer play as a bad boy. One diamond in the rough of this game's voice acting is the other player character, the Death Knight, who we heard a bit from in the intro, albeit without the voice modulation he has in all his regular dialogue.
A toy in the web of our queen you'll become, for I am her god, and you are to be stopped.
Wow! What a speech! Unfortunately for her, it's going to be her last.
I love this guy, constantly pushing the paladin to make evil choices and kill things with exactly the right level of ham I would expect from a character like this in a setting like this, which doesn't take itself as seriously as something like Diablo.
The right door is not for you. That is only for the enlightened.
Bitch goddess. But wait! Look! The right door is also open. It was damaged during the attack, and these stupid idiots haven't fixed it yet. So, we can go through the right door and reap the rewards of the Academy instead of letting this sanctimonious goddess take one of our items.
And he's got some real banger lines to work with.
I loathe necromancers. Being summoned by that jumped-up corpse molester was one of the most unpleasant things to have happened to me. I only hope I meet him again under different circumstances.
Before we can get to those, though, we need to get past the most difficult enemy in the game, Samuel's torturer, Fergus. This guy is a monster. His attacks hit hard, fast, and rarely miss. Our attacks, on the other hand, are weak, slow, and miss all the fucking time. And if you do manage to whittle him down to low health, you get to watch him undo it all when he heals all the way back to full. Luckily, he only has enough mana to do this once, but come on, man, that's just cruel. And it's not like we're overflowing with tactics to deploy against him at this point, because this fight is actually really early. Like, there is a single-digit number of enemies you fight before him, meaning you don't have a lot of opportunities to level up, and you don't have a large selection of weapons and spells to work with. Now, if you watched my video on the first Divinity, you might remember archery being very powerful in that game, and you can find a bow if you explore around the cells, so maybe you'd think that's the perfect solution to this fight. Have one of the guys get his attention and kite him around, while the other one pelts him with arrows from afar. That does make sense, and it's actually a pretty good tactic against a lot of the hard enemies throughout the game, but not against old Fergus. This is because bows don't have built-in matter replicators materializing arrows from nothing anymore. You now need actual arrows in your inventory if you want to shoot an enemy. This is actually a pretty nice change, enabling the game to have special arrows that do AoE damage or attack with different types of magical damage that the enemy you're fighting against might be vulnerable to. And arrows are really common, so I never ran out of basic normal arrows to shoot. Except in the battle against Fergus, since it's so early in the game and there aren't a lot of arrows to be found yet. And it really stings when this dumbass whiffs shot after precious shot as his buddy runs for his life from Teemu Jason Voorhees. So how do you beat this guy? Well, according to the official strategy guide, he has a massive vulnerability to bone damage of all things. But seeing as how nothing available at this point actually does bone damage, that's not much help. You can whittle him down a bit with the arrows you have, but after that, you kinda just have to YOLO it and pray for RNGesus' blessing to take him down before all your health potions are spent. But eventually, he does go down. What's funny is, this is kinda the hardest boss in the game. Sure, later bosses have more health and can dish out more damage with their varied movesets, but later on, health potions are very easy to come by and have none of the limitations other games put on them to stop you from endlessly spamming them. They have no cooldown, no drinking animation, and no diminishing returns on the healing they do. You can even pause the game mid-combat and use potions to heal to full while the game is paused. So unless the enemy you're facing can more or less one-shot you, the only way to die is if you're not paying attention to your health. Which can happen surprisingly often. Most enemies, including bosses, are really weak, dying to just a few hits and doing tickle damage in return. So when one of them blasts 80% of your health off in a single hit, it can catch you off guard. One thing the game doesn't immediately convey is just how the story of this game relates to the events of the first one. In case you haven't played it, the story of the first game is very simple. A demon possessing the local duke leads a bunch of cultists on a mission to summon the Lord of Chaos, basically fantasy Satan, into the world, and the gods have chosen you, the player, to become the Divine One and stop them. After many adventures, you put an end to the cult and banish the demon, but not before they manage to reincarnate their lord as an infant. And like I said, it's not immediately apparent how our demonic prison break connects to any of that, but that's all explained in Child of Chaos, the tie-in novella that came with many physical copies of the game. The novella covers what happened after the first game. The Divine One, canonized here as a guy called Lucian, was unwilling to kill a defenseless infant, so instead he adopted the child as his own, hoping he could raise him right and overcome the kid, being Satan. A flawless plan that actually worked pretty well until the kid, who he'd named Damien, having grown to become a young adult, was seduced by a witch working for the cult from the first game. After discovering her true allegiance, Lucian executed her in full view of Damien, driving him to embrace his evil nature. Now Lucian couldn't let this stand, but still didn't want to kill his adopted son, so he instead banished him to the world of Nemesis, never to return unless he or one of his followers allowed it. There he was found by the natives of that world, the Renar, who let him enroll in their magic school, with their High Elder even adopting him into his family. Damien wasn't too grateful though, and after growing frustrated by his inability to return to Rivellon, he betrayed the Renar, killing his second adoptive father and having the magic crystal shielding Nemesis from the demonic plane stolen. Not only did this allow demons to invade, but also made them invincible by siphoning power from their own realm. The war that followed between the army of invincible demons and the Renar did not go well for the Renar, and that's where the game starts, with Nemesis overrun by demons and the Renar devastated. Also, the gods may have caused all the suffering because they were bored. And one of those gods is Elvis. Most of this isn't too relevant to our boys as they struggle to leave the Citadel, other than explaining why Nemesis is the way it is. And it's really not relevant to another of the new additions to the game, the battlefields. In every act, you can find these keys that unlock your ability to enter the battlefields. Before I explain what these are, let me tell you the story of my first experience entering the battlefields. The first thing that struck me was the jarring shift in tone from Samuel's dark fortress to a camp in a pleasant forest clearing. In this camp, I found a few NPCs that offered training, trading, and a side quest each, before I set off to explore this strange new land. After fighting some skeletons, I encountered a very remarkable looking entrance leading into a very unremarkable looking dungeon. The place was massive, and filled to bursting with more skeletons and loot. But as I entered the second floor, I felt repetition sink in. With an identical visual design and enemy roster, it felt just like clearing the first level again. And that's when it hit me. It didn't just feel like I was clearing the first level again, I was clearing the first level again. The second level was exactly the same as the first one, right down to the placement of junk on the ground. Despite this egregious copy-pasting, I finished the dungeon, exploring every nook and cranny, clearing every enemy, and finishing none of the quests. Further into the overworld, there were more of the strange entrances, but they were locked, and with seemingly no way to unlock them, I returned to camp, richer in XP, gold, and disappointment. I then looked up what the deal was with the battlefields, and suddenly everything made sense. You see, the battlefields are randomly generated. There wasn't some lazy designer at Larian copy-pasting floors in a dungeon, my computer did that. The jarring shift in tone is because this isn't meant to be treated as canon to the story, it's purely for gameplay. Those locked entrances I found can be unlocked with more keys found later in the real level, and that's probably where the objectives for those side quests were. Not that I would ever find out. While I was enjoying the game at this point, I wasn't enjoying it so much that I wanted more contextless combat just for the pure enjoyment of the gameplay. The manual recommends that if you're struggling with the game, you can use the battlefields for grinding to level up a bit, but I didn't really find the game difficult enough to justify that by the time I found the key needed to enter them. Needless to say, I didn't do any more of these, which is why I said the lack of skill points was partially my own fault earlier. I could have grinded in the battlefields and leveled up more. That would have given me more skill points to work with. But I didn't feel a lot of motivations to power through a bunch of dull, randomly generated content to make an already easy game even easier, so I never did any more battlefields. That isn't to say I never went back there, though. You can enter them whenever you want, all the people in camp are rich merchants, and when you leave, you just get sent right back to where you were. So, I would use this place to unload loot whenever my guys got over encumbered. One of the vendors also has a nice replenishing stock of health potions that I would buy up whenever I was in the neighborhood. This provided me with an effectively limitless supply of money and potions. As you can probably tell, I'm not a big fan of the battlefields. The randomly generated dungeons are harmless enough, but the merchants in the camp are just too good. As a quality of life feature, it goes way too far. Why would you bother learning where the merchants are in town when you can just snap your fingers and appear in a camp full of better merchants at a moment's notice whenever you want? Armed with the spoils from there, it doesn't take long before we reach Samuel's chambers, where the big man himself is waiting for us. Another highlight in this game's voice acting alongside the Death Knight, and for much the same reason.
I particularly liked it when you gave the guard the rum. Good thinking. I gave him a quick swim in the lava, of course, just to cure his handle. And you, servant of goodness, how did it feel being bonded to such an evil creature?
He doesn't so much chew the scenery as he does a death roll on it like a crocodile. He's known about our escape attempt all along, allowing it to continue for his amusement, letting us think we're about to escape so he can take it all away right as we think we're about to make it out. This backfires spectacularly when he's summoned away right as he's about to send us back to the cells. And in this world, summons are not optional, so he vanishes, allowing us to overpower his Death Knight Praetorians, steal all his treasure, and make our escape. Letting us watch another of the Death Knight slideshows, where he gives his thoughts on the event of the act and explains the next steps of our plan. The natives of Nemesis, the Renar, are renowned for their ability to open portals to other worlds. Or rather, were renowned for it before the demons almost wiped them out. Still, he figures that's our best bet for returning to Rivellon, so that's our new goal, finding the Renar. But before that, if you really want to rub salt in Samuel's wounds, there is an oddly obscure alternate ending to this act. There's a locked smithy we passed earlier where you can overhear the blacksmith saying if you pull one of the levers in there, it'll flood the whole citadel with lava, and the key to that smithy can also be found in Samuel's treasure chamber. So we storm the smithy, kill the blacksmith, and don't pull the lever. I mean, obviously, why would that even be an option? No, what you actually have to do is gather coal from Fergus's room, sulfur from the hospital, and salt from the kitchen. You then combine these three to make a nice homemade black powder bomb, which I'm pretty sure wouldn't work. Kitchen salt isn't saltpeter, but whatever. Maybe chemistry works differently in this world of fantasy and wonder. You can then use the bomb on the forge, which presumably then floods the citadel with lava. I say presumably here because it goes right to the end of Act PowerPoint slide after you use the bomb. And it doesn't change whether you destroy the citadel or just leave. Nothing else changes later in the game either. No new dialogue of Samuel molding out over it or anything. It's just a nice chunk of XP to cap off the first act. However you do it, leaving the citadel signals the end of Act 1, which was pretty good, and the beginning of Act 2, which sucks. Sure, it starts out well enough with a more open environment to explore, and things seem fine until we rescue an imp from another of Samuel's prisons, who turns out to be the son of their chief. He's the one that takes us to the imp village, which is where most of this act takes place. And the imps in this game are very different from the ones in the first game. In that game, they were these kind of hyperactive weirdos.
Zig-zag flax. Axe, go to council. Very easy.
While in this game, they are a race of primitive innocents living in an isolated village whose speech sounds like this.
Shaman keeps insisting we should make sacrifices to gods. But how can we do when can't find key to precious money chest?
They're Smurfs. The red Smurfs that talk like cavemen, and this entire act is all about them and their evil shaman who's using religion to control the village with an iron fist. Our guys have zero interest in any of that, but the chief's son offers us a deal. He'll show us where to find the Renar we're looking for if we can cure the disease plague in the village. Some brief investigating reveals the imp's frog livestock as the cause of the disease, which you then need to cure with the help of the village alchemist, who was exiled after the shaman framed him for cannibalism. The side quests are almost entirely helping various imps around the village with their concerns, like recovering the lost key to this guy's treasure chest, or finding a new type of mushroom for the mushroom farmer. You know, exciting stuff to really get the blood pumping. While doing some of these side quests, we stumble upon a new type of item, a unique weapon. While most of the items in this game keep the same randomly generated stats as in the first game, these uniques change things up by having predetermined stats. So if you were wishing for the dice tosses that determined if the reward at the end of a questline would suck or not to go away, you're in luck. In this game, there's no dice toss. If you see one of these uniques, you don't have to guess. You'll know for sure that it sucks. I found a lot of these in my time playing, and I can probably count on one hand the number I actually used. Partially because the regular items with randomized stats generally just have more stats in total than the uniques, and partially because some of the uniques seem straight up unfinished, with no stats at all to set them apart from generic vendor trash items. We also find the teleporter stones in an easily missable cave. There are a few puzzles you can choose with them, and I guess they can make getting back to town faster, but I ended up not using them that much. While on the subject of teleportation, the portal network from the first game is entirely gone. Only Act 3 has a similar system, which is made worse by the fact that instead of having a nice map interface you can use to pick where you want to go, it instead has pairs of teleporters that all lead back to a shared hub, meaning while you can theoretically get around pretty quickly, in practice I constantly forgot which one goes where and instead just tried each one until I found the one I was looking for. Not only was this kind of annoying, but rapidly moving from zone to zone like this can make the music tracks from each of the zones overlap and play at the same time. Sounds great! The only really good part of this act happens after leaving the imp village for the first time, when we're suddenly whisked away to the lair of a necromancer. The same necromancer that summoned Samuel to slaughter our fellow paladins and capture us in the intro. And much as he summoned Samuel to do his bidding, he has now done the same to us. explaining that this summoning is only temporary, but that he'll consider permanently summoning us to Rivellon if we help him out. It's also an offer we can't refuse, and summoning also binds us to his will for the duration. He also refers to us as human a lot, which is a little weird.
You found me another crystal fragment. I'm pleased, human.
A lot of characters actually talk to us like this.
Do not shrink from me, human! I hear your fear!
Okay, it could make sense when he does it. Maybe Death Knights aren't human under all that armor.
Don't you remember this, human?
Well, maybe his power has gone to his head and he thinks he's transcended humanity somehow?
The swamp borders are shifting towards my farm at an alarming speed, human.
Yeah, I got nothing. Anyway, the Necromancer wants us to gather the shattered fragments of the crystal that once protected Nemesis from the demons. After Damien had it stolen, the Necromancer tried to perform a ritual to bring it to Rivellon and take its power for himself. A ritual we interrupted when we attacked, shattering the crystal and scattering the fragments across both Rivellon and Nemesis, where they now radiate chaotic magical energies corrupting all who linger near them. Both the second and third acts have us return to him whenever we find a fragment on Nemesis, after which he sends us to find another fragment on Rivellon in short, self-contained little stories that offer brief reprieves from the desolate landscapes of Nemesis in favor of the more conventional fantasy world of the first game. They never managed to top the first area he sends you to, though. In that one, we need to fight a band of our fellow paladins corrupted by a fragment of the crystal. It's a very simple story, elevated by a clever recycling of assets from the first game. The paladins have retaken and cleansed the Cursed Abbey, one of the more atmospheric locations from the first game. Where once it was an undead-infested ruin, it has now been restored to its original purpose, and made a base of operations for the paladins. It's never said that it's the Cursed Abbey, you have to figure that out on your own based on the layout. And in a game with very few callbacks to the original, realizing where this was actually a pretty cool moment. The paladins have been corrupted by the crystal fragments, turning them into blind zealots. One of them even reveals they raised an innocent village, killing all the damned souls within. And in another callback that I'm sure shocked all the other Divinity lore nerds out there, that village turns out to be Alaroth, the peaceful village of healers where the players started their journey in the last game. All these little stories end the same way, when we reach the fragment in the area and send it back to the Necromancer. But we'll come back to how that whole story ends when we catch back up to it in the third act. For now, it's back to the Smurfs, and the abrupt ending to their story. After helping the chief's son and the alchemist cure the disease, there's a boss battle against the shaman, who resorts to the evil, underhanded tactic of spamming healing spells. Hey, there's only one guy allowed to spam heals here, buddy. Anyway, it turns out he also had a fragment of the crystal, so we're taken away for an in-office meeting with the Necromancer after killing him. But when we return to the village, we're met with a scene of carnage. While we were gone, Samuel tracked us down and slaughtered the whole village trying to get to us. And this could have been a really impactful moment, with the poor innocents that took us in our moment of need slaughtered, all because of us. Except for the fact that spending a few hours dealing with these voice-modulated little bastards was starting to win me over to the Death Knight's ideas about them.
An imp plague! Fantastic! Wipe the little buggers out in one go!
Also, the soul-surviving imp doesn't seem too upset about what happened.
Let's go! I come back later!
To bury the dead?
To search ruins for valuables!
He's even willing to lead us to the Renar, and he kinda gives the impression that he would have led us there right away if we had just thought to ask him when we first met. Which kinda makes the entire second act a pointless filler story, other than meeting the Necromancer. Doubly so when the little bastard doesn't even lead us to the Renar. He's scared off by a messenger from the archdemon Asmodeus. No, not Asmodeus, Asmodeus.
Greetings. I have the honor of inviting you to meet with the great Asmodeus.
Greetings. I have the honor of inviting you to meet with the great Asmodeus.
Whatever. He's one of Samuel's peers, who's more of a Faustian trickster devil than his brutish colleague. He wants to meet us for a fun game of riddles where the dialogue box just gives us the right answer, and promises a reward of more gold than we can carry if we win. Yep, that sure is more gold than we can carry, alright. He'll give us a consolation prize though, a Renar Elder, just what we were looking for. She's actually a character from the Child of the Chaos novella, the biological daughter of the Renar High Elder that adopted Damien. When the demons invaded, she made a deal with Asmodeus to save Renar Hogwarts and drive the demons out right as it was about to fall, in exchange for becoming his servant. So, he saved the academy and drove out the demons, by raising its dead inhabitants as vengeful ghosts after the demons had already killed them all. Classic Asmodeus. Sucks for her, but great for us. That is, until he curses her to become a summoning doll that can't help us any more than the skeleton can. Well, at least it's something, and when we run into the imp from before, he tells us Ron, the Renar goddess, may be able to remove the curse if we bring the doll to her temple. So that's our new goal for the third act. Only problem is, the temple was occupied by the army of chaos after the demons drove out the Renar. Most of the army is made up of humans. In fact, other than Samuel and Asmodeus, there don't seem to be any demons fighting in their ranks at all. I guess they left the occupation to the humans after the fighting was done. Anyway, we can bluff our way in since one of us is, a Death Knight. Unluckily, the church that we need to enter is off limits, and to enter, we need to engage in the gimmick of Act 3, the ranking system. You see, the army of chaos here at the temple are strict adherents to a fair, meritocratic system where helping people around the temple will earn us a varying amount of points depending on the difficulty of the quest. Returning this kid's lost ball only gives 500 points, while fixing a busted teleporter by doing the most annoying puzzle ever devised by man rewards a whopping 5,000 points. And a lot of these quests are found just by reading the temple's notice board, which for some reason is voice acted, and by a guy desperately gasping for breath between sentences.
Important notice for all temple members. As most of you have heard by now, an expedition party that was sent out to look for signs for the Damned One has been missing for a few weeks. The temple is looking for adventurers to find them in exchange for a rank increase. Don't forget to regularly check your rank with the Keeper of the Ranks. You might be number 1 without even knowing it.
Only the person with the temple high score is allowed to enter the central church, so most of the main quest in Act 3 is doing side quests for points. Wonderful. Thing is, it's still an improvement over Act 2. Not only are we not dealing with imps for the most part, but we're even dealing with humans for most of it, which gives us a welcome reprieve from the overmodulated voices. At least until we reach the camp belonging to the Renar rebels, who have some of the most distorted voices in the game.
Are you the adventurer that has access to the temple and its surrounding area?
Great. And let's not sugarcoat it, looks-wise, these guys are just Protoss with mouths. Anyway, the leader of their camp has a quest, which at face value seems kind of interesting. He's hesitant to trust us since all other humans on Nemesis are servants of chaos. And I'm sure our friend, clad head to toe in evil-looking black plate armor with glowing red eyes, isn't helping our case. But he's still willing to give us a chance, asking us where our allegiance lies. Do we betray our fellow humans, or side with those chaos-worshipping servants of evil? And you might think, this is a classic CRPG moral choice. Maybe he has an alternate way into the temple that doesn't require us to hold the high score at the evil arcade. But that's not what this is. It's just an optional side quest where we help him reforge a lost demon-slaying sword. We didn't even get the sword at the end, just XP, it's really disappointing. Though I did like the passive-aggressive line the Renar Elder says when you side with them.
I know the humans you were deciding against are evil, mindless servants of the demons. But it was still not an easy decision, I guess.
It's not like we're locked into an evil route, though. The only path forward is to do evil's bidding while not having a choice to actually side with the bad guys. In fact, there are no choices in this game that affect the story at all, which would be fine if they didn't tease us with the potential of meaningful choices like this. It also kind of makes all of Act 3 another filler story where barely anything happens that affects the main plot at all. The environments were also starting to get pretty old at this point. Basically every overworld area in chapters 2 and 3 are very similar looking volcanic hellscapes broken up by rivers of lava with only minor variations and doodads to differentiate between them. Like, this area is sprinkled with crystals, while this other one is full of giant mushrooms, but the vibe is still more or less the same. The temple here in Act 3 is a bit of an exception though. It's got a nice contrast between the well-made Renar-built stone structures and the simpler medieval-looking furniture the humans put in there after they took the place over. The graphics overall are a bit hit and miss. Most of the environments look good, if a bit samey, The sprite-based graphics work really well, just like they did back in the first game where a lot of them came from, especially in the Necromancer missions that take place on Rivellon. The 3D graphics don't hold up as well. They're not terrible, but compared to the character sprites from the first game, it's a real downgrade. And since there aren't that many models, there isn't an awful lot of enemy variety. By the end of Act 3, I'd grown pretty sick of wandering around the wilderness fighting earth elementals that all share the same screen-wide, screen-shaking earthquake AoE spell. Some areas also have a weird sense of scale. Like the human army camp here in Act 3, you can infiltrate it by wearing a disguise, but if you do, you'll eventually be discovered and have to fight your way out in a desperate struggle against the entire garrison. All 4 of them, including the general in charge. Compare that to fighting your way out of the army camp in the first game to see what this could have looked like. Another somewhat interesting side quest can be found when exploring these ruins, where we run into Zandalor of all people, the wizard from the first game. Even though he doesn't look a thing like Zandalor, he wants our help retrieving an, amulet, in exchange for taking us with him to Rivellon. And the dungeon holding the amulet bafflingly has the main theme from the first game playing on just one level. I guess because Zandalor is an important character from the first game? Whatever the reason, it being there is very out of place. And it's not the only one. The soundtrack is a pretty even mix of reused tracks from the first game and new ones, but sometimes it feels like tracks are just randomly assigned to areas without any rhyme or reason. Like, this doesn't really feel right for a dingy, undead-infested dungeon, does it? And it just has the main theme playing in some areas of the overworld here in Act 3. Why? There's nothing special in this forest to explain why the main theme should play here of all places. What kind of open world game would just have its main theme playing during random exploration? The tracks themselves are pretty good though, especially that main theme, with the first game's composer, Kirill Pokrovsky, returning to work on this one. Anyway, it turns out that Zandalor not looking anything like he used to may have been a hint, as he reveals himself as an imposter when we return with the BDSM collar, so no shortcut to Rivellon there. Instead, we climb the ranks of evil, kill our main competitor after her spell to brainwash the Death Knight fails, and enter the temple with a magical staff a Renar prisoner at the temple told us about. Inside, the goddess Ran herself appears to test us in various ways. But even if we fail the tests, she lets us through anyways. Very generous, that Ron. In order for her to restore the doll, we need to gather a series of symbols, 2 of which are simple enough, but the 3rd is just pure, concentrated bullshit. We get teleported to another area with symbols lining the walls. Interacting with one makes the Death Knight say,
"What a strange symbol. It seems to be stuck to the wall."
With a different voice actor than usual for some reason. You get the same line when you interact with the other symbols, so what do you think the solution is? Maybe look for a tool to remove one of the symbols from the wall. Hit it with a weapon, maybe. No, what you actually have to do is systematically interact with all the symbols, of which there are dozens, until you reach this one right here, which looks completely indistinguishable from all the other ones, but if you interact with that one, the Death Knight instead says,
"This symbol seems to be loose."
And you can take that symbol off the wall and leave. Great puzzle design there, guys. 10 out of 10. Also, that random other voice for the Death Knight, never heard from again. But with all 3 symbols in hand, Ron will remove the curse from our Renar Elder, who requests that we gather all the crystal fragments and restore the crystal. So we help the Necromancer one last time, gathering the last of the fragments, allowing him to reassemble the crystal. After which we slay him, his domination over us broken by the restoration of the crystal. When we return it to the temple, Nemesis' protection from the demons is restored, giving the Renar a fighting chance to reclaim their world. Or at least, that's what's supposed to happen. When I did it the first time, I accidentally did a sequence break by going to the Necromancer before restoring the Elder. And because the act ends right after that, with her sending us to the Haunted Academy after we restore the crystal, she never had the curse removed, so I got to keep her as a doll for the duration of the game. It's actually kind of impressive that it doesn't break the scripting. Like in the dialogue, the camera is supposed to pan to her when she's talking, but if you don't remove the curse, she's not there, so it just pans to an empty room whenever she's talking instead. Regardless, the third act ends the same either way, with her sending us to the Haunted Academy to learn the Renar art of rift running, opening portals to other worlds so we can use it to finally return to Rivellon. Act 4 is a land of contrasts. Starting with the positives, the dilapidated Haunted Academy provides a nice change of scenery from the ashlands that have dominated the previous acts. And it's here that the story really gets going. Yes, in the fourth and final chapter. The ghosts of the Renar that once lived in the Academy don't know they're dead, still going about their lives as if the demon invasion never happened. And they think we're Damien, reliving moments and conversations they had with him back when they were alive. It does a lot of work establishing Damien's character as an unusually gifted student, but one who refused to adhere to Renar customs, like refusing to pay homage to their goddess, and questioning the Renar oppression and enslavement of the imps. It also returns to the linear approach of Act 1, which for this game, I prefer. The side content I found to generally not be that great compared to the main quest. As for the bad parts, almost every NPC in this act is not just a Renar, but a Renar ghost, which means the voice modulation is back with a vengeance.
I'm Elder Antipar. I will become the High Elder, if the Council ever sees the real value of my work. The Council of Elders, they elect the High Elder every 52 years.
It also has some really infuriating quest design, like this one where you need to find a yellow gem and come across a dark pit with something yellow at the bottom, so you reach down and recover a bone. Oh, I guess the gem wasn't down there after all. No, the gem is down there. You just need to keep reaching down, grabbing bone after bone, until finally you get that damn gem. Another issue is that most of the time in the Academy is spent learning about what the Renar were like before the demons came, and it turns out they were kinda boring. Like one of the subplots is a Just Say No-esque story about students getting hooked on fantasy Adderall. Still, it feels like a big improvement over the middle two acts as we relive Damien's experiences learning at the Academy. And many quests have you actually learn the skills you came here to learn, as opposed to pointless busy work like the previous acts. A spanner is thrown in the works when, in our demon summoning class, we accidentally summoned Samuel, who instantly clocks our location before we can send him back where he came from, which gives an air of urgency to the final round of tests. Undercut somewhat when Samuel is summoned again for another test where we have to race him through an obstacle course. But when we finally make it to the last level, Samuel catches up to us, and this time, there's no summoning nonsense to save us. We have to fight him. And it's not a terrible boss fight. Samuel hits hard, both with regular attacks and spells, and he's brought some of these shadow creatures for backup. But now that the crystal's been restored, he's no longer invincible. And at this point, I had enough health potions to fill an Olympic swimming pool, so killing him was only a matter of time. And the moment is kind of anticlimactic. He doesn't say anything as he dies, and neither do we. I would have loved a Smurby Death Knight line here, but I can look past that. Because after that comes some of the best story content the game has to offer, as we get a flashback to the last conversation between Damien and the High Elder. Even after finishing his studies and learning how to open rifts between worlds, Damien was unable to open one back to Rivellon thanks to Lucian's curse. Wishing to help, the High Elder went there himself and met Lucian, who explained everything about who Damien is and why he won't let him return. At the mere mention of Lucian and the reminder of his exile, Damien flew into a rage and slew the High Elder. We talked to the ghost of the dying Elder, who even after that was willing to forgive Damien and try to help him return in whatever ways he could, giving us the coordinates to Rivellon, the last thing we needed in order to return ourselves. But only after the Death Knight has an unusual outburst of anger at the High Elder for giving Damien.
Foolish creature! Someone strikes him down and he wants to forgive them! Wait, he's dead now! No better than such a weakling deserved! I would have damned him to the deepest pits of hell!
Usually the Death Knight's comments are more comedic in tone and more a petty, dickish kind of evil, but that seemed almost personal. Which makes a bit more sense after we use our new skills to return to Rivellon, at which point the Death Knight casually breaks the soul forging and reveals that the whole adventure has been based on a lie, an elaborate scheme cooked up to trick us into returning him to Rivellon. He's not just some Death Knight jailer forced to work with us to escape a demon's curse, he's Damien, the Damned One, the Lord of Chaos himself, and we've been unwittingly dancing to his tune this entire time. He forged his soul to ours willingly to trick us into breaking Lucian's curse. And the moment of the reveal is presented so well. In a game with pretty crappy voice acting all around, the moment where Damien says his name and his whole demeanor changes really works.
I hope you recognize me, Servant of the Light, for I am Damien, the creature you call the Damned One. It was I who killed the Renar High Elder, and it was I who persuaded the Imp Shaman to steal the crystal. And it was also I who led the army of demons that conquered this world.
It's still recognizably the same guy, just speaking in a more calm, dignified way than the Death Knight's usual over-the-top scenery chewing. And when he describes the plan, it all adds up. When Lucian banished him, he allowed for his return if he or one of his servants allowed it. And we are one of his paladins, which is what allowed us to bring him to Rivellon despite Lucian's curse. And the soul forging provided a believable enough cover story to fool me at least. I was still expecting the decision between the Renar and the humans in Act 3, as well as a few other choices where you can decide to kill or spare some people to come back and determine if you get a good or bad ending. Now this is partially because Damien is kind of a non-entity in the story before the final act, only brought up very occasionally to the point where you'd probably not even know who he is unless you played the first game or read the novella. So in that sense, the twist being unpredictable just means there wasn't enough foreshadowing before it actually happened. The only major piece of foreshadowing I can think of is the Death Knight's reaction to hearing the High Elder forgiving him, which is literally the very last thing that happens before the reveal. I guess there is also the ghosts at the Academy thinking we were Damien, which makes some sense given one of us actually was Damien. Now, as a devoted trooper of the Divine One, we're not just gonna let our archenemy get away with this though, so we do battle with our former companion. And it's at this point where I realize the archery build may have gotten carried to the end by the Death Knight's melee powerhouse, because try as I might, I can hardly put a scratch on this guy. He, on the other hand, can lay a whooping on me with his massive hammer, and as the fight goes on, he even summons in a bunch of hads to help him out. Luckily, the game has a feature that really saved the run, re-speccing. You can pay a kind of extortionate fee to have your guy forget one of his skills, but frequent trips to the battlefields to unload crap throughout the game left me with more than enough money to reconfigure my guy as a powerful two-handed melee fighter. And after boosting his stats with powerful potions, I was able to use this new build along with a lot of healing potions to defeat both Damien and all the creatures he sent against me. We don't kill him though. When his health reaches 0, he simply teleports us away, and gives his ominous farewell, which is sadly not voice acted for some reason, before walking off, free from his imprisonment to pursue his revenge. What follows is the longest final PowerPoint slideshow, where Damien narrates the events of the game from his true perspective, which kinda calls into question who exactly he was narrating these to before, where he felt he had to stay in character. The Paladin?
Despite my companion's resourcefulness and pathetic attempts at bonding with me, I was growing frustrated by the curse.
Doesn't sound like it. Anyway, it, along with the game, ends with Damien swearing he'll use his newfound freedom to take revenge on the one who imprisoned him years ago, setting the stage for things to come. And that's the end of the game. Except you can now go into the max level battlefields, with trainers letting you level your skills off the charts and endless procedurally generated content. So for all you Beyond Divinity gameplay enjoyers out there that just couldn't get enough of the combat in this game, this one's for you. For the rest of us, let's move on. Before we go to the conclusion, I did do a second playthrough where I wanted to test out a magic build, since I'd read online that magic sucked in this game, but noticed some powerful looking spells when going through the strategy guide that came with the GOG copy. So I cranked the difficulty up a notch to Tactical, and made the Paladin a sword and board tank, as well as a proud child soldier serving in the army of the Divine One, while the Death Knight would be a magic-focused wizard. Many of the complaints about magic I read were that basic spells cost too much mana, so I figured I would mitigate that by using wands, a weapon type whose damage scales with intellect rather than strength, as the Death Knight's main source of damage, while his spells would be reserved for tougher foes. None of the spells I had in mind were available in Act 1, but Act 2 saw the Death Knight learn the Hammer spell, which does bone damage in a small area and briefly stuns anything it hits. It's very strong, especially in the late game where many enemies are these shadow creatures whose massive vulnerability to bone damage turns them into lambs to the slaughter if you have this spell. Though it does kind of pose the question of what exactly bone damage is supposed to be. If it's hitting someone with a bone, wouldn't that be crushing damage? And stabbing someone with a sharpened bone would be piercing damage, wouldn't it? Anyway, mentioning vulnerabilities brings us to the next spells I got. First was the Curse spell, which gives affected enemies a vulnerability to one type of elemental damage. I then initially wanted to combine that with the Fireball spell for massive damage to tougher enemies. But that plan fell through when I realized that while fireballs do deal massive damage, they also deal massive friendly fire damage, which is a bit of a deal breaker when our other guy is right next to the enemy most of the time. Instead, I used the Wind of Furies and Elder Fire spells, which deal wind and fire damage in an area respectively. They worked pretty well against both groups of enemies and bosses, especially combined with the right curses. Though the only boss that presented any difficulty after getting these spells was Samuel, whose elemental resistances counteracted the vulnerability from the curses. Still, Elder Fire was able to slowly whittle him down while the paladin stood there and took the punishment like a champ. He wasn't able to contribute much damage himself though. I don't know if I put points in the wrong stats or what, but around Act 4 the paladin must have gone blind or something, cause he seriously couldn't hit a goddamn thing. So despite wildly different builds, the Death Knight would once again be the carry. I was able to use some potions and the Berserking skill, one of those basic warrior skills only taught by that random guy right at the end, to boost his skills to where he could deal reliable damage to Damien in the last battle. However, after I died due to forgetting to chug health potions, that save got corrupted, so I never got to finish that run. Still, I got what I wanted out of it, the knowledge that magic builds can work. Though if I was to play it again, I would probably just make both characters melee warriors with two-handers. That seemed to be both the strongest and easiest build to me. In conclusion, this is not a good game. It has an overcomplicated skill system that doesn't give nearly enough points to give you nearly enough room for experimentation, even with two characters. The combat alternates between being face roll easy and you nearly getting one shot, neither of which is very fun. The premise of champions of good and evil being forced to work together to escape a demon-infested hell world had a lot of potential, but the execution left a lot to be desired. After escaping from the Citadel, the story just aimlessly drifted from place to place without the party really achieving anything to advance their goal until they reached the Academy in the final act. I can kind of see where they were going with the story, where you go around righting some of the wrongs Damien has done to Nemesis. In Act 2, we kill the imp shaman that stole the crystal on Damien's orders. In Act 3, we restore the crystal and free Damien's adoptive sister from Asmodeus' curse, while Act 4 has us follow in Damien's footsteps, learning rift running at the Academy. All of these would have been great opportunities to have the Death Knight subtly foreshadow his true identity, or make any comment at all about these situations he's supposed to have a strong personal connection to. There's the skeleton of a good plot here, but it's missing all the meat. None of the characters beside the Death Knight / Damien and I guess the Demon Lords are particularly memorable, and they're mostly memorable for their over-the-top cheesiness, not for being well-written, well-realized characters. I will say, that reveal at the end did earn the game some points back for me, but wasn't able to make up for the lackluster rest of the game. In a retrospective interview, Larian CEO Sven Vinke shared his thoughts on the game. We brought it to market, it was not our best game, but it brought in money. And that really goes to show the context they were making this game in. They were in dire straits financially, and this game, along with their work for hire making kids games, made it possible for them to stay in business. This second lease of life would eventually give them the chance to develop a real sequel to Divine Divinity, but that is a topic for another day. This has been Rotten. If you liked the video, you can hit the like button, and if you'd like to see more in the future, you can subscribe to the channel. See ya.